Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hypnotic Happenings, where hypnosis happens. Duh. And now help me in welcoming your co-host, award-winning hypnotist, Dan Candell, and Michael DeShalit.
Hello, my hypno homies. Dan Candell here, and welcome to the first episode of Hypnotic Happenings,
where hypnosis happens. Duh. I'm your host, Michael DeShalit.
Here with Michael DeShalit, my cohort here and co-interviewer. And we are actually starting this one off on the right leg, aren't we, Mike?
Absolutely. We've had an amazing guest for you today. We couldn't have had a better first guest today.
So our first guest, let's jump right into it. He is blonde, he is beautiful, and he is rocking the blue shirt today. You also may know him as creator of Hypno Thoughts and the main face behind Hypno Thoughts Live. Please welcome the only, the amazing Scott Sandland.
Ooh,
hey everybody. How are you guys doing?
I'm the applause track. So sorry, that's all you got.
Scott Sandland, known for his blue shirt and to a lesser extent, anything he's ever done in his life. That's me.
I figure you can tell your own stories and introduction way better than we could tell yours.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I'm genuinely excited to be the first guest on this thing because this thing's going to be a ton of fun.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And Hypnotic Happenings, Scott, we had brought this concept up to you at Hypno Thoughts Live 2019. And Michael and I had originally talked about doing something where we need to all get off our islands and just commiserate with one another and tell stories of like the weird, the wacky, the unusual, because it can be lonely sometimes as a hypnotist, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main reasons I created hypnothoughts.com, and then we switched from online conferences to in-person was because, you know, you're in your own little office, in your own little echo chamber, you know, having people tell you you're great or tell you something did or didn't work or whatever. And, you know, not having colleagues, I think is an important impediment in our profession for a lot of reasons. You know, some of it being self-regulating means we should know each other so we can help regulate each other and ourselves. And more of it's just community and, you know, it's just fun.
Absolutely. And Michael, you had, Michael is saying we should do something specifically for hypnotists. And we kind of together came up with this idea of Hypnotic Happenings. And this is something where we're not only going to goof off and tell fun and interesting, weird and wacky stories, but also what learnings we've taken away from it and what learnings you may be able to take away from it as well. So this is informative, this is fun, and this is meant to be something where we can all let our hair down and just have fun with it. So Scott, you have some pretty interesting working where you work and how things have developed over your career. You have some pretty interesting stories. Also, you've probably heard some amazing stories from all the people attending your conference. So let's jump right into it. I wasn't even there this year, and I heard about a Scott Sandland story that happened a few years ago.
Oh yeah, I was there though. I heard the story live and in person, and it was during I think it was one of the shows. It was a family-friendly show, wasn't it, Scott?
It was billed as not a family-friendly show. And then Richard Rumble got on stage and told everyone it was okay for it to be a family-friendly show because there were children in the front row when I told this story.
Whoops.
But that's not even the first time I told this story out loud. The first time I told this story out loud, it was to an HPTI cohort, our first group of HPTI students in year one. So HPTI was a school that Richard Clark and I created. Now it's run by Richard Nongard. But when we created it, year one was way too hard. We had a couple people with master's degrees telling us, this is harder than grad school. This is harder than college. You guys are grinding us. And it was a year of, you know, it was genuinely 25 to 30 hours every week of schoolwork for a year. It was gnarly. And there was, you know, there was a book report due every 2 weeks on top of 20 hours of video required to watch every week with tests and quizzes and it was just too much. And so we were almost at the halfway point. And Richard, and we had a weekly mentorship class. And we had this moment where Richard Clark calls me. He's like, we're losing these students. They're just all burning out. And we were like, I know it's harder than we thought. When on paper, we thought this would be okay. We're killing them. And he said, we have class tonight. You're up to talk to the students. You need to save the room. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? Like give them discounts? Like tell them it's going to be easier? He's like, we can't change the curriculum. You need to make them happy. You just need to do the thing you do that makes people like us again, because they don't like us and they don't like me. So we need you to do something likable tonight that's going to win a month of effort. And I was like, well, what? And he's like, I don't know, but you've got 2.5 hours to figure out what you're going to do. I'm like, oh shit. Okay. And this was back when you were doing video conferencing, only one video could be shown at a time. And there was just a chat room. Okay. And so each person would give a presentation. People would type in the chat questions and then you would answer them. And it was my turn to give a case study. And that's what the idea of this class is a case study with question and answer. So I said, all right. And so this is the case study that I gave. And so as I'm telling you this story, understand I told this story to a webcam with no feedback at all. And I had no idea what was happening on the other end of the 25 or so monitors as I was telling this story. Do I just jump right into it, or
go right ahead? Just jump right in as if there's 150 people watching you right now.
Yeah, this is going to be great for my career.
Hey, I told you openly, I told you the dildo story.
Yeah, that's true. You did a good job on going first on this. So yeah. I will follow your lead. And by the way, if people are just watching this and don't know that story, that's an amazing thing you just did.
And I cried when you interviewed me on camera.
You did. Yeah, you cried. You totally cried.
I cried.
You were one of the first people I interviewed. Both of you were two of the first people I interviewed. And I said, Stephanie and Richard were like, hey, how are they going? I was like, 2 people have cried. They're like, who cried? I was like, Deshalit, like got emotional talking about his daughter's wedding. They were like, whoa. So yeah, you cried.
You have that effect on people, Scott. You do.
Yeah, they either it goes to dildos or crying. So you know,
you have the song. You sing the songs that make the young girls cry. You're like the Barry Manilow of hypnosis.
I'm like the Barry Manilow of hypnosis, which is how we got Dan Laurinaitis.
Laurinaitis. That's how we got Dan Laurinaitis. That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, so this client comes to me for stop smoking, or so I thought, and maybe once a year, maybe not quite. I get a person who lies on their intake form. And you know, they always put something innocuous like stop smoking. And this was one of those. So I I look at the paperwork and it says stop smoking, pack a day kind of thing. I was like, all right, that's what we're doing today after lunch. So this guy shows up, and this guy's a wealthy dude. He's a successful dude. And you can just tell right away just by looking at him, this guy, he looks the part. And I'm in Orange County, I'm in Newport Beach, where, everything's crazy expensive, and it's very normal to see $1 million worth of cars, in just the front row of a stoplight. It's crazy here. And so this guy looks the part. And I said, hey, how you doing? I'm Scott. Nice to meet you. And he sits down. I said, so you're here to stop smoking. How much do you smoke? And he says, none. And I was like, awesome. So we're done here. That'll be $350. And he's like, no, I'm not actually here for stop smoking. I was like, oh, cool. Okay. You're one of those. I get it. I have to earn your trust, and you don't want to put it in writing and all those things. And he's like, right. I was like, okay. So I tell him about what I do, and I kind of pre-talk and build rapport. And I impress upon him that I'm trustworthy in whatever way we do that. And then he opens up and tells this story. And he says, well, I come from humble backgrounds. I'm from Iowa, and I was raised actually on a farm in Iowa. And I was like, okay, that's great. And he said, and really rural Iowa, there's no one around. We were on this big ranch pig farm in the middle of Iowa. And I was like, okay. And he tells me that he hit puberty and there was no one around but the pigs. Right?
Now, I've worked on a farm before.
And we're off.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that. Never, never mind. Go ahead.
Desperate times, I guess. There's no atheists in a foxhole and no virgins on a pig farm. And so he had increasingly frequent sexual encounters with some of the pigs on the farm. And, for a couple of years in his, adolescent puberty phase. And then he went to college and, connected with humans and stopped doing that completely. And, had girlfriends, had successful relationships, and then, graduated from college and succeeded in business. And I won't get into the details of how he succeeded in business, but it was a boring, innocuous, hard work pays off. And he became very financially stable and moved to Newport Beach, had job stuff, had girlfriends and social life, and things were great. And then one day he was just bored and lonely. And something in his brain clicked back to old habits. And he's like, you know what I actually want to do? It's crazy. But he wanted to, do what he had done on the farm all those years ago. But he didn't want to. And he explained this to me in my office, that he knows now as an adult that's tantamount to some sort of animal abuse. And it's wrong to do that. And having a thought and carrying it out are different things. And he had the thoughts and he had the feelings and he had the desires. And so he needed to do something about that. And being the industrious kind of guy that he was, he decided to handle this artificially. And so he went to a Michael's craft store and a sex shop back to back.
As one does.
As you do. By the way, if there's something that you want as a sexual object that isn't at the sex shop, but is at Michael's craft store, this means you have an odd kink, right? I
still like the term artificially, though. I wish I would have known that term when I was 16. Ma, I'm in my room. I'm doing it artificially.
Doing it artificially, Mom.
It's okay.
I'm applying technology to the problem. And so, he went and bought a fake vagina and paper mache supplies. And he assembled a life-size almost paper mache pig and affixed the fake vagina appropriately. And he said he worked on it all day, and by his account enjoyed it all weekend. And that was good enough for a while. And then it wasn't, because in talking with him, I discovered quickly that he's highly auditory. And so that meant he missed the sounds. And so this was the time when you could get an iPod Shuffle that could play music out of it. And so he got an iPod Shuffle, and he downloaded a whole bunch of farm animals, specifically pigs, but not exclusively. There's some ambience to it. And he put that inside the paper mache pig, which was great because it sort of has like this drum. So the sounds would just kind of, emanate. And that really helped him enjoy his pig even more for a while. And then he realized the other thing he missed about it was what he called the thrill of the chase. And what he needed was to sneak up on it. And just leaving it in the room and walking away and coming back, that wasn't doing it for him. And so he bought a Roomba, the robot vacuums. And he built a little platform on it. He put the paper mache pig on it, turned on the animal farm sounds, and had the Roomba just free roaming around his house. And he'd walk outside or walk around the block so that when he came back in, he wouldn't know where it was. And he would listen. And he would hunt it down. He would find it, and he'd have his way with it. I'm sitting there with my best poker face, listening to this guy telling me about, in pretty specific detail, how aggressively he ravages his fake vagina infused paper mache pig robot sex pig. And then he looks at me and he says, so is that normal? And now it's my turn to talk. And I came up with what I think might have not been the right response. I said, no, that's not even remotely normal. That's not average. That's not, common. You had to go to a craft store and a hardware store and a Best Buy to get a Roomba after you went to your sex shop. That's how not normal this is. It took tons of engineering and creative thinking. No, that's not normal. You're a pig fucking weirdo. And he said, that's sort of what I thought. I was like, yeah. And so before I tell you how I actually worked with this client and make this somehow instructive, you need to understand the first time I told that, I just said all of that in maybe even a little bit more detail, just to a blank room, just to an empty webcam alone. And then I finished the story, and all the students who had no idea where I was coming from heard that whole story. And I was like, so, are there questions? And the students just all exploded, and they all turned on their microphones and all that. So,
just a quick note, though, for any PETA representatives watching this webinar, it was free range pig.
Free range, yeah.
Free range pig. Not in captivity, not caged.
Not caged. No, he knew to put them on the side of cliffs so that they push back.
Nice.
Sorry.
The stair feature on the Roomba, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so actually I worked with the guy. We had great rapport, and I was like, look, oh, by the way, he would keep this thing hidden in his closet, and like he'd have a girlfriend over, and he was terrified that the girl he was dating would discover this thing, which is an understandable fear. And he was nervous that he would have like Christmas parties at his house, and he would have to like take the thing apart and like dismember it and hide the parts and then put it back together for playtime. And he went to these increasing lengths to manage this kink, this fetish. He had been doing this for close to a year before he came to me. And so he and I talked about this, and we talked about loneliness versus relationships, what types of intimacy matter, taboo, and all of those kinds of things. And the first thing we did was like de-escalate it to get rid of the taboo factor, because that was a big part of the driving force behind the desire. And then shifted things around and helped kind of point things in healthier, more productive directions. And then he genuinely actually sent me, he didn't do anything. He always paid in cash, and for years didn't tell anybody. But then he finally opened up to tell people, hey, I went to a hypnotherapist once, and he was great. And they're like, what for? And he's like, oh, stop smoking. And they were like, you don't smoke? He's like, not anymore. Yeah, so that's that guy. But yeah, then the second time I told it was at HypnoThoughts Live on that stage with 2 children under the age of 10 in the front row, just looking at me, just horrified while I talked about a guy, raping a robot sex pig. And that's that guy.
And you're like, did I just create seeds to plant in these kids' heads what they're going to do when they're lonely?
In my defense, I repeatedly said to the parents, like, look, if you guys want a refund, you should get while the getting's good, because it's about to, turn a corner here. And the parents were like, no, this is great. It's, it's 8:45 in a casino. This is probably the perfect place for our children. And
Yeah,
So,
Vegas is great for kids. And didn't
Vegas is great for
the
kids.
mom? Didn't one of the moms like chew your ass at the end of the show or outside or something? Or
Yeah, so I made the mistake of having too much to drink backstage with Carl Smith and Richard Clark after my set while the stage hypnotist was going. And it was Shawn, Michael Andrews, and Kenda. And, they did great, but, I had time to drink a little too much just from the adrenaline. Oh, my God, I can't believe I told that story. And then I came around after the show, like I hurried around so that I could apologize to them in front of, the box office right there. Just say, hey, I'm sorry, and all that stuff. But, now that I think of it, they hated me when I was on stage where I was supposed to be, and it was their fault. And so then I drunkenly chased them down and breathed whiskey breath on their children in some horrible, like, oh, I'm sorry, I told you all that, kid. Like, they were like, dude, just quit while you're behind. And they were not thrilled with me, turns out. I'm not a fan favorite with that parent group.
Well, a lot of people who are watching and listening might say, well, what about client confidentiality? Because I can't imagine there would be a million pig fuckers in the world.
No, but
I imagine there are not a million.
The pig signed a waiver, though. The pig signed a waiver.
I got to say, I like my odds that this guy's not going to find me and sue me and make it public record that it was him. So I'm betting he'll swerve first. I mean, it was a long, long time ago. I figure there's some sort of statute of limitations on 10 years before I can anonymously tell an embarrassing story. But with no identifying information, really.
And you know what, too? There's, when you think about it, I'm sure, even though this was one person, I'm sure there are other people who have probably done similar things, just are very secretive and private about it.
Well, he's very secretive. It was very secretive and private about it. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about, people's. Is Michael looking for his pig? Where is he?
Michael, it's right above you.
It's above you, Michael.
I'm just trying to figure out what to do with this thing right here.
Yeah.
Mine is Rosie. Mine's Rosie the robot. Yeah. So.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
You have a robot fetish. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I came home the other night and we just bought a Roomba for Amazon Prime Day.
Yeah.
And we got one like dirt cheap. And my boyfriend has severe OCD. And I hear like two vacuums going on at the same time. Like, what the frig is happening right now? We have a Dyson. He's chasing behind the Roomba with the Dyson. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, the Roomba's missing a spot. I'm like, no, it's not.
It's not done. You don't know if it's missed a spot until it's finished.
But if I walked in, there was a pig, a paper mache pig attached to the Roomba. I don't know.
You'd have a whole bunch of other questions.
Yeah. I don't know what creeps me out more. The fact that Michael DeShalit has a pig behind him and Rosie on his Roomba.
And Rosie just started moving all on her own. I don't know what happened there.
That's awesome.
I said to Michael earlier, I'm like,
I'm just going to go chase Rosie. And if you see me, if I don't go back for like 15 minutes or so.
That you have named it is, I think, an interesting thing to discuss right now as it relates to romantic relationships with Roombas.
Is this an intervention? Is this turning into an intervention?
That was what we call a teaching tale in the biz. And
it's a teaching tale, yes. A teaching tale, yes.
Yeah, that was my Ericksonian way of asking you to please stop doing that because we're all concerned and we care about you. And
yeah, I feel very loved right now. The Roomba is free range, though. It's free range.
That's good.
For all you PETA activists out there.
And this is what Hypnotic Happenings is all about. I mean,
that's right. That's right. Sharing the bizarre, the weird, the unusual, the strange. And I think we all have stories like that. Scott's are a little bit better because he lives in a nicer neighborhood. But
where you can get away with being weird, right? Where it's
exactly.
And the quality of the paper mache pig is better as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get what you pay for. It's like all things. And so he really went high quality on it, which is good for him.
Now, this think of how many of us have had clients lie on intake forms, or like, and this probably happens to you. It's like the last 5 minutes of the session, and I do programs. I don't do one-off sessions. I know everybody's different, and it always happens like the last 5 minutes of the last session. The guy will lean forward and he'll go, "Okay, so I jerk off too much and I watch too much porn." I'm like, "Well, we could have done this like throughout the entire program. Now there's 5 minutes left." And there is one guy who said to me, Dan, I watch a lot of porn and I jerk off a lot. What do you recommend I do? I said, well, in order to help you out, let me see your technique. And I just sat there. It was stone-faced, and this guy was like, whip it out now. I'm like, no, I'm just fucking with you. Yeah, but seriously though, I'm gonna need to see your technique. And we just kept going back and forth.
And then did you set an anchor on that? And then now, and anytime you think of porn, just imagine me saying that, and just
in my face here, smiling at you, nodding my head. Yeah, let's see. But Scott, you and I had a conversation. We've had several conversations, and Michael, actually, Scott and I had met when I was giving a speech right by your office.
Yeah.
That they had called you first.
Yes.
And something happened, and then
I was on vacation when they called, and like they called twice, like in the same week while I was on vacation. I was just not returning their calls from their perspective, and then they called you.
Yeah.
And then I called them back and said, "Hey, I'm back from vacation." They're like, "Oh, we already found a guy." And then you happened to say to me, and I didn't ask who it was. And then you happened to say to me, "Hey, I'm in Newport Beach doing a corporate gig." And I was like, "Oh my God, it's got to be the same one."
And it was. And what's funny is you and I had met for a drink, and then I had to get up hungover and present for 45 minutes to this group.
Yeah, I totally sabotaged your gig.
But right after that, Mike picked me up from the hotel because he was in Newport Beach too.
Newport's the best place to come hang out. It is where hypnotists come to vacation.
Well, so while we were having this other conversation, you told me about this other experience, because I was training people and wanting to figure out how to have people ethically in my, like, other hypnotists I'm training watching me do sessions.
Yes.
And you were the only person I know that was doing that. And I was asking you about it. You had a really interesting experience with this. Would you mind going into that experience?
Yeah, it was a learning moment for me too. Because I just have interns just sit in, and the interns knew, look, shut up, just don't say anything, take notes, watch what I'm doing, watch what the client's doing. And then when the client leaves, you and I will debrief and we'll talk about what I'm doing and all that stuff, but just, watch silently. And overwhelmingly, my clients were really cool with the intern being there. And, I was pretty strategic about when I would book those things, when I knew it'd be okay. And I had a client who she wasn't thrilled with the intern being in the room. We still continued with the session, and maybe halfway through, like in the session, there's like, call it 30 minutes of talking and 30 minutes of hypnosis, just for easy numbers. We were like maybe 20 minutes into that 30, like 2/3 of the way through okay, now we're going to do hypnosis, kind of pre-talky intake catch-up time. And we're right at that spot, and the intern just says, "You know what that means is this." And importantly, she was very wrong and way off base. So this client's a very practical, down-to-earth person, and the intern is very metaphysical and spiritual, which is allowed, and there's room for that, but you've got to target your message.
Right.
And so she, through like 2 or 3 assertions from like a spiritual bend, at my client, who was not ready to hear any of that from anyone, let alone some random intern who's interrupting her session. And so while the client's talking, the intern interrupts her and says, that's probably this. And my client's like, no, we're going over here. And the intern doubled down on it. She didn't just go, oh, forgive me. She was like, no, really? And did it again. And I knew she was wrong. And my client knew she was wrong. And she was certain she was making a difference in lives today. And I said, whatever fake name I want to give the intern, Sarah, like, Sarah, like, let's cut it out, Sarah. We're going to keep going. And as soon as I said that, and I looked at the client, I was like, so where were we? And the client was just, I'm ready for the hypnosis part now, and was just like shut down completely. So I started doing the hypnosis more generically. I do a relaxation therapy kind of thing that was, because I was seeing what was happening. There was nothing personal. There was nothing intimate about that client session. There was nothing good about it. And then, so then when we finished the session, my client opened her eyes and was also, everyone in the room was aware that it was not a good hypnotic process. The intern didn't realize it was because of what she had done. And so then when I took the client's credit card, I just charged half my normal rate and swiped it, and didn't make a thing of it because I didn't want to talk about it. And then she left. And then as soon as the intern left, which was an hour later, because I had one more client with her, I called my client and I said, hey, I just want you to know, I'm terribly sorry for what happened with that intern. I promise, number one, she'll never be, there will not be an intern in any future session we have ever again. And that intern will not be in a session for any of my clients ever again, which was both true. And I want you to know, I only charged you half for today's session. And she replied, thank you. And I'm surprised you charged me at all, to be honest. And I said, you're absolutely right. You know what? And while I was on the phone with her, I refunded her payment in full. And I said, my goal was to just get you out of the room invisibly, and was prioritizing that and just ending the whole thing. And I should have just not charged you. And this session's absolutely on me. Thanks. And she came back and everything was cool. But yeah, that was a moment where, just, you try to control your office. And that's why we have offices instead of doing home sessions, right? We don't do house calls because we can't control that environment. And I normally can control the environment, but I brought in an X factor, had coached her on what to do and not to do. And then in the moment, she just thought, well, I'll take a risk with Scott's credibility. And that's what happened.
There's still that human factor there where even though you preface this beforehand, you do your best to go through everything in detail. It just goes, even the most powerful hypnotist can't control other people.
Oh, right. So is that intern now, is she a practicing hypnotist?
I do not believe she is, no.
Okay. Interesting, yeah. Mm-hmm.
She's a smart person. She if she's practicing, and I don't know that she is or isn't, I don't think she is, she could get good, with the reps, but she was very bad at pacing. She was very, very set in her models and wasn't comfortable adapting to whoever was in front of them and the audience. And I think that's a really important part of our work, is to have that rapport and pacing ability. And I think that she would only be able to work with a very small subset of people because of that, or she would need to evolve that as a resource. I think pacing is probably the most important thing we have.
Well, it's a good thing she had you as a mentor, to at least, kind of coach her through that. Because that's the hardest thing about it is Dan and I do trainings ourselves too. And it's, we can teach people the craft, the art, the skill of hypnosis, but sometimes you can't teach people the interpersonal skills.
Yeah. The soft skills, right?
the soft skills. And sometimes that's, that's impossible to teach, and I don't want to say you're either born with it or you're not, because that's not the case either. It is a learned skill.
Yeah.
It's a learned behavior. But sometimes, it takes a little bit longer to coach somebody on that than another person.
And yeah, I mean, there is natural talent for anything. Some people are more predisposed to being good at math, or whatever, and some people are more predisposed to interpersonal relationships and soft skills. And it also, how much you prioritize something totally matters. I'm not getting any better at playing the guitar because I've never tried, and I'm still as terrible as I was, on day one, because I'm still on day one. But yeah, as you guys are teaching classes, it's one of those things where you can watch people who are in their first breakout. They're going to do a basic induction moment, and you can watch someone. They're like, oh, there's pieces there that aren't about hypnosis, but those pieces, when you add hypnosis to it, he or she's going to have something really cool there.
Right. And you mentioned one word, which is evolve. And I think as hypnotists, we all have to be malleable to what our clients bring us. And part of that is being able to evolve and to adapt. And part of that is learning new techniques to always fill your toolbox. I shared several names with both Scott and Mike, whereas like these people actually literally changed my practice. They changed my entire viewpoint on hypnosis, and it's changed the way I do hypnosis and that I work with my sessions. And you actually have many of those people on a panel of an event that's coming up, of what we would consider to be the influencers of the profession. So can you describe a little bit about the event that's coming up? Is it in San Diego?
Yeah, it's in San Diego. It's called HypnoThoughts Platinum. And to me, there's a few pieces about it that I'm really happy about. So with HypnoThoughts Live, the idea is everybody gets, a shot. And it's important to us that, presenters and vendors and attendees all have the same type of badge, that everybody's genuinely equal, and that it's a true community and everyone gets an equal voice, so the cream will rise to the top. And that's great. And for a while, people have been saying, yeah, but who are your favorites? Who do you want to have talk and all that? And I don't want to turn it into a who's my favorite or who, whatever, because it's not that. But it is about recognizing different voices and different perspectives and seeing which ones actually fit really well together. As we were talking about this internally, I thought of it really like thinking of it as you plan out like a meal. I use cooking as a metaphor with hypnosis a lot. I think they're pretty similar, actually, because you think about ingredients and craft and timing and delivery and presentation and all these things that work well together. And when you think about putting together a meal, you think about what goes with what, and maybe a wine pairing as well. But you start thinking about how these things interrelate. And so when we created HypnoThoughts Platinum, we picked 6 presenters who each get a half day. And the idea is the audience is not anybody. The audience is people who have solid foundations and have a practice going and are ready to get some insights that can help them evolve. I really think of this in terms of good to great. And so the 6 presenters we have this year, we spent some time thinking about whose voices have a good synergy and a good harmony together. So that as you're hearing this person talk on Friday afternoon and then that person on Sunday morning, you'll start seeing themes and threads tie between those. And I think those themes and threads coming through in a 3-day event helps us evolve, because you're like, oh, well, this isn't just something that Melissa Tiers does. Ken Guzzo does something very similar, or I wouldn't have realized if I had heard these months apart. But because you bring this up, wow, you're right. David Snyder and Steve Rame actually have something. And Kelly Woods and Jason Lynette are both talking about this idea of playfulness and enjoying your client time rather than just having it be work or whatever it is. And so as you start seeing those themes, and those are our 6 presenters, Jason Lynette, Kelly Woods, David Snyder, Melissa Tiers, Steve Rame, and Ken Guzzo are the 6.
Right.
And those are 6 big names that, for the price of HypnoThoughts Platinum, you would spend more than that to train with any one of them in the given time. And so we want to have those people get a conversation going. And then, it's in San Diego, so the weather should be pretty good. So there's a lot of like sit outside literally at a lagoon, right by the ocean. We're like 2 blocks from the ocean. And so the idea is, sit in deck chairs and just chat and and just have that fresh air, open conversations, and have this kind of spark those long form conversations that I think the profession will benefit from.
Absolutely. And you're keeping this pretty like small and exclusive, right? This isn't a big, huge convention.
No, we want it to be small. Like HypnoThoughts is like 1,000 people, and this is like 150. Yeah. And we've priced it a little bit more pricey. It's a little bit more expensive. It's a little bit nicer place. And the reason we're making it a nicer place, it's a little bit more expensive, and the ticket for admission is a little bit more expensive, is the people we're going after for our audience can afford the write-off, right? And they're at a place in their business where they can justify doing those things. Whereas HypnoThoughts, we want to make sure people who are just getting started, they can afford this thing. And we can make sure everyone can get there. And this one is for a different audience. And so we wanted to make sure we weren't taking money from somebody who was just getting started and not giving them things that they're ready for. So that was our logic.
And that's the thing I like about you, Scott, is you're a firm believer in collaborating. You're a firm believer in education. You're a firm believer in attending conferences. I've seen you not just at HypnoThoughts, but I've seen you at other conferences in attendance. And you even mentioned it several times during this presentation today that you're still learning too. You're still getting new information and applying that new information. And that's the nice thing about this. And I want to put in a plug for conferences and for education.
Totally.
If you can be at these conferences, go to them. Otherwise, and again, that's the spirit of Hypnotic Happenings, is we don't want you to be on an island. You need to break bread with your peers, if you will. You need to have conversations inside a classroom and then outside a classroom too. And that's one of the best things about HypnoThoughts Live, and I'm sure is going to carry through to Platinum, is that, it's not just about the classroom learning. It's about the collaboration outside of the classroom, in the hallways, on the deck chairs at night. That's where the real education, where the real learning comes from. And that you can't buy from a downloaded audio program. You can't buy from a textbook. You can only experience that experientially, live and in person.
Yeah, and I'm coming up on my 60th conference I've been to. I've gone to a ton of these things as a presenter, as an organizer, as an attendee, as a volunteer in the back of the room holding up the 5-minute signs. Like I've done every side of it, and I also started going to conferences before I was 21, so I couldn't go to like the bar at night that people were doing.
Same.
Yeah, and it was like it was
couldn't or
lonely.
didn't. Couldn't or didn't. That's the real.
No, I didn't. I didn't go. I was 19 years old. I wasn't going to the bar, like, because they were gonna like ID me, and I didn't want to be like humiliated in front of these people I was looking up to. I didn't want Michael Elner to point and laugh at me. Robert Otto going, "Why are you trying to get?" And so I know the difference between going to a conference and then that night going back to your room and studying. And I know the difference between going to a conference and then that night going out and having conversations and asking questions and bullshitting each other and comparing and contrasting. And you learn so much more the second way. And as great as these things are, this really is something I wish we had when we were all getting started, is these kinds of online communities and these online conversations, and people who know what they're doing in the industry talking candidly with each other for the benefit of others, I think is hugely important to the evolution of our profession, among other things.
Absolutely. And that's where you host conferences. We host a lot of trainings. We have some trainings coming up for stage hypnosis, for clinical hypnosis through the ICBCH. And this is, we've had so many hypnotists who have already taken basic training and advanced trainings retake a basic training,
Yeah.
because they know they can learn things from other instructors. I was sitting there in the training that Mike and I did in Vegas not too long ago, taking notes with things that Mike was saying. Mike was in the room taking notes on things that I was saying. And afterwards we're having dinner. Well, not dinner. Let's be honest about this. We're drinking Crown Peach and iced tea.
Iced tea, yes. That's very good, by the way. If you haven't tried that, it's amazing. And Crown Royal just came back on the shelves again. Just saw it the other night.
Good to know.
And Michael's wife, Billy, her sweet iced tea, like you get a cavity after you drink a drop of it. But you're
an alcoholic diabetic when you're done with this.
Right.
Very good.
All of your organ systems are just shutting down.
Shut you down. We believe in a holistic approach to failure in our house. So yeah.
So this is our first episode of Hypnotic Happenings, and to our hypno homies out, let us know what you think about this. Let us know what you want to see on here, because we want this to be flexible. We want this to be a community for not just for us to get on and blow our bags of hot air or chase pigs around on Roombas. We also want it to be for you. So please reach out, let us know. If you haven't already, go to Hypnotic Happenings on Facebook. It's a group, and join the group, or go to hypnotichappenings.com and fill out the form. So that way you do get the updates when we have people on. We're having people on bi-weekly. This one we pre-recorded. We're going to be doing lives coming up as well. So we want to make sure that this is something that you get what you're looking for. And we want to see what you want. So please feel free to let us know. Scott, what do you think? Did you like it?
I think, yes, I liked it. And yes, I think everyone should stay plugged in on this. This is the kind of thing that evolves and becomes something really, really cool, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited to be the first guest.
Awesome.
And another quick plug too, before we wrap it up, another quick plug too for Hypno Thoughts Live. You just released, I think it was yesterday, the speaker proposals applications for next year. So if you haven't done that, go to Hypno Thoughts Live and fill out that application. I already did. I filled mine out. I'm very excited about that. And this is how far in advance really you should be planning your conferences.
And by the way, to your point, you said you wanted to plug just the idea of conferences, and I want to say that's, I have Hypno Thoughts Live and Hypno Thoughts Platinum that I'm financially invested in, but there are so many amazing conferences.
Yeah, there are.
And some of them are big and some of them are little, and the relative size doesn't convey how it can benefit you. All conferences have a voice, and they're all going for something. And you should, if you're looking at conferences, don't just look at what's close by. That's okay, and I understand budget, but look at what each conference is trying to do and what they're about, and see if that fits with what you're about. And that really needs to be not just what their tagline is, but really look at who their speakers are and really look at what they're going after, because there are such awesome conferences and such great opportunities right now to learn and to get better at helping people.
Absolutely. So we'll be back on in 2 weeks. We're not going to tell you who the next guest is because we want it to be a surprise. We want you to tune in. We want you to enjoy this. And we don't want you to be on an island. You're not alone out there. You have us. Okay, so you are alone out there, and you have us to fall back on. Scott's getting close to the camera, and so it's really about collaborating. It's really about coming together. It's really about your voice being heard. So please go to hypnotichappenings.com, fill out the speaker application if you would like to be a guest on our webinar. And I think that does it for this episode. Anything else to add before we say goodbye?
As I always like to say, be well, do good, be true to who you are, and stay sexy.
Words to live by.